Thank you and welcome back. So today there will be no politics because I'm joined by someone who is really not into politics, but a very important guest there because Gambians, a lot of Gambians have a knack for not watching anything that is not politics. So I hope you will stay and then you watch. As Musu Bakoto Sawo or Sawo is my guest today, the former deputy Executive Secretary of the TRRC, as a match winner of the 2020 Daily Trust African of the Year Award. Really, the Nigerian leading newspaper is describing her as a Gambian change maker and tireless women rights advocate who was announced winner on January 4th, 2020. She joins me now. Musu, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Labi.
So, Musu, first things first, I mean, as an activist, someone who has been out there to push the rights of women and girls out there, how did you pick up work or a job, if you like, in activism, advocating for the rights of women and girls? How did that all come about?
I started about age 9. I remember representing my school, Bakau Newtown Primary School, at several competitions, drama, debate, and also at an early age I was exposed to other opportunities like participating in International Children's Day of Broadcasting, where my school has identified me. So at a very early age there were some good teachers who recognized my potentials. Teachers like Mrs. Bakurin, Mrs. Sanyang, Mrs. Low, Mr. Sow, Mr. Jalo, they all saw the potentials in me and identified my public speaking skills and confidence, and as a result they encouraged me by ensuring that every time that there was an opportunity of that nature, I would be one of the people identified by the school to represent it. And subsequently, of course, I became members of child-led organizations like NACO Child Network, Children for Children, and finally the Voice of the Young. And I think that is where really my passion for activism blossomed, and I am here today.
And you are here today. Yeah. What really intrigued you when you were going into this? What really got you going, kept you going until today?
As a child, I've always been recognized or considered as stubborn, but I would say in a good way. I ask questions when I believe there wasn't much clarity. I challenge issues that I deemed unfair. And I think for me, being exposed to those opportunities that I've talked about has further built my interest, particularly when I began to represent my school at functions like there was a National Child Friendly Conference that took place at Friendship, and my school identified me as its candidate, and having seen other young people who were activists at the time as well, for me, emboldened me into that journey and built my interest into becoming an activist, first as a child rights activist, but particularly those that affect the girls.
When it comes to the rights of women and girls in this country, as well as children, I mean, there's been a lot of, over the years period, you've seen there's been a lot of emphasis, really, that has been placed on the need for women and girls to be protected when it comes to their rights, their rights to almost everything, basically. What have you come to learn in terms of the problems, really, that our women and our girls, and even our children, go through?
I think we live in a society that is motivated and driven by socio-cultural norms. And I think because our cultures and traditions have placed or assigned gender roles and not bearing in mind the effects that these gender roles have had on both genders, as a result of those specific norms, women have been disadvantaged a lot. Girls, people would say, oh, why are you always talking about women's rights? But we want there to be an advancement of women's rights, because for the longest time, women and girls have been disadvantaged due to socio-cultural dimensions of the Gambian settings. And consequently, we live in a society where there is no room for unequal protection, whether it is before the laws or even in terms of how we live our lives. God created us all, and I believe as a result of that, He didn't make one gender or sex superior to the other. And to live in a society where we see women disadvantaged in terms of access to education, we see women go through issues like harmful traditional practices such as female genital mutilation and child marriages. These are not issues that affect men. These are issues that affect women, mainly because of some of the cultures that we have, which dictate that women go through female genital mutilation, which creates an environment where a girl's maturity is determined. Is determined by certain biological features instead of even the maturity of the person mentally, and thus you would find girls are the ones who are exposed to issues like child marriages and not necessarily boys. And this is the reason why women rights activists have gotten up to speak against these inequalities that have existed for the longest time. It's not just about issues of equality, but issues of equity as well.
And when it comes to about our society, what we have seen, what very much is known is that it's a society that is very much seeped into the cultural norms and values that you talked about there. But has there been progress in terms of people really changing?
Yeah.
Has there been any progress?
Of course, there have been a lot of progress in terms of how far we have come. The enactment of the Children's Act, for example, which is the domestication product of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child and also the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, as well as the Women's Act, which is the domestication product of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as well as the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Rights of Women in Africa. So seeing these enactments, of course, is an indication that there is progress in terms of our legislative framework, because before the existence of these acts, there wasn't any specific legislation that was protective of members of the community who are very vulnerable. So to see such acts, as well as the Domestic and Sexual Offences Acts, amongst other things, in particular the amendment to the Children's Act, which prohibited child marriage, as well as the amendment made to the Women's Act. This is, of course, a progress that we have seen, because prior to perhaps 15, 20 years ago, this wasn't the case. And to see that happen means there is progress. Also, there are certain issues like female genital mutilation and child marriages that were not openly discussed 30 years ago when Dr. Aissatou Touré, Auntie Ami Bojang Sissoho were campaigning to end FGM. Organizations like Tostan and Wasukafo were campaigning to end harmful traditional practices. They'll tell you the hurdles or the struggles that they've had, the backlashes that they have faced in communities. Now we live in a society where there are still people are still resistant in terms of issues of female genital mutilation and child marriage in particular. But they have been more responsive, because you go to communities and they welcome you and they listen to what you have to say. And we have also seen young people take the lead when it comes to these campaigns and changing the narrative in general around advancing the cause of women and girls in the Gambia. So certainly, in my view, there has been a lot of progress, although there remains a lot that needs to be done, but there is a lot of progress.
How about the mindset aspect when it comes to, I mean, to make laws is one thing, but the mindset in terms of the communities and how people think and some of the things that they subscribe to or believe in, really, that is also another issue. I mean, to this day, I mean, some of the topics that some of the activists, people like you, that deal in issue of female genital mutilation, for example, you go to communities, or even if I publish a story, for example, you will see people writing that, well, but we will still do it. This is something is very much acceptable. So how is that aspect looking like, the issue of mindset.
Yeah, and that was what I was talking about in terms of 30 years ago, not being able to go to certain communities to speak about this. If you ask the older activists who had been doing this work for much longer. But in our current times, there's still communities that you go to where they don't want to hear what you're saying, and they're not interested in it because of the misconceptions around it in the context of religious beliefs. And as a result of that, when you speak to them, they don't want to listen to you. Even if you tell them that there are laws in place, they'll tell you, I don't care about the law. My religion supersedes any laws in this country. But we also tie that and understand that to be because of, we draw a lot of inspirations from our spiritual leaders, and because there's generally ideas or ideologies that this is a requirement in Islam, for example. So in our work, we've been using other strategies like using religious scholars who are anti-FGM or child marriage activists who are able to use the scriptures of Islam to be able to inform people that this is not in any way a religious obligations on their part. And we've also been reading extensively, drawing inspirations from other Muslim countries like Morocco, for example, whose Islamic Marriage Law Act was amended to prohibit child marriages, amongst other things. So we have seen a lot of progress. We have seen communities that have been very acceptant, who have been very encouraging. We go back there for monitoring and we see that they understand these issues. So there's still, like I said, a long way to go, but I believe we have come a long way in terms of changing mindsets. And in particular, we've been using the do no harm approach, where you're not telling communities about how barbaric their culture is, because that could be deemed as something that is very insulting. But rather, you're having dialogues with them. We believe in social change communications, where you're telling them using survivor stories, using health practitioners for them to show them some of the consequences, and the survivors are able to give first-hand narratives. Because in our context, women sometimes go through a lot, but because of how society perceives them, that they must be endurant, that they must be in order to be virtuous, you have to keep things to yourself, you have to be patient and all whatnot. We've seen that survivor stories has helped us in our campaign, in a sense that more women are now opening up to talk about their struggles and then the effects either child marriage or FGM has had on their lives.
And also, one thing I think I should ask you, this is only important that I ask you this. Yeah. When it comes to activists in the Gambia, there is always this claim being said about some of you, really, that you are doing this for money, not necessarily being sincere about what you are doing, but all you want is money. Is this true?
For someone who started this work at 9 years, who is very innocent and has had zero exposure to money, it can only be for the love of it. And I think sometimes this has discouraged a lot of people. There's sometimes a general notion that in the Gambia, people don't have independent minds, that if you say something, you know, someone must have influenced you to say that.
Or given you money.
And I think for a lot of reasons, people also question your intelligence, that you're not able to articulate things for yourself and think about what is right or wrong. There's a lot of activists that I know who are passionate about this, who use their personal resources. I say, for example, the team that we have at Think Young Women, we run programs such as our Girls Mentorship Program, and this program has been running since 2011. And we have consistently been training girls between the ages of 12 to 17 on sexual and reproductive health and rights issues, gender-based violence, communications, advocacy, and other important life skills. And most importantly, creating a network, a support group for these young girls. And there have been times where we have received a lot of support from UNFPA to implement this activity, but there have also been years where we did not get any funding for it. But for purposes of continuity, we put together our own resources, my team and I, and we ensure that that program happens. I think for people who are supposedly motivated by money, they wouldn't invest their money into a program of that nature. They would rather always wait for money to come in. And I also remember we have volunteers, myself, Jama, Binta, Mariatu, and a whole lot of people. We volunteer at Think Young Women. We dedicate our time, free times at Think Young Women and make it functional. We raise funds for our staff because we have hired people who are committed, who are there, who spend their time at the office. We look for funds to pay those staff. And we remember there was a time we did not receive a lot of funding in order to be able to support the staff, pay rent, as well as volunteers. And I remember myself, Jama and Hadi Jonga would take from our monthly salaries to pay interns at the office just so that they would not go without transport allowance, and we continued to do that up until the time we were able to receive enough funding to sustain the payment of their transport refund. So I think sometimes it is unfair that people are motivated by money, the assumption that people are motivated by money, particularly activists. Our personal experiences sometimes also drive us. My personal experiences and growing up as someone who has always had interest motivates me every day to wake up and fight for the cause of women and girls.
And Musu, you are 30, but
Yes.
Here is what activism has cost you.
Yeah.
It has cost you to become or to be named African of the Year, at least according to Daily Trust. But this is a top newspaper in Nigeria. I would read their newspaper every now and then. How did this happen?
To be honest, I didn't know. I received an email that I was African of the Year. I would come to find out that I was nominated by UNDP under the leadership of Aissata Day. And this was how I found out that I was nominated by them. It wasn't something that I had envisioned. It wasn't something I had expected. It wasn't something that I had even known existed prior to being awarded the prize and also being recognized as the awardee for 2020. So it really came as a pleasant surprise. But I continue to say that I don't do this work because I want to be recognized. I do this work because I don't want girls in this country and beyond to go through what I have been through. So I fight every day to see that we live in a society where women are not looked at as dependents, but that they would also be treated equally in society, in dignity and in respect as well as equal opportunities, such as access to education, which when you look at the figures, really, we're not there for several reasons. So this is the reason why I do what I do, not for the recognitions that I'm hoping to get, because it's never supposed to be about those things. It's supposed to be about the people that you seek to represent.
Fair enough. And in the statement that was put out by Daily Trust, signed by their acting CEO, Noura Daura, this is what they said about you. Married at the age of 14 and widowed at 21 with no inheritance, Musu, who had also gone through female genital mutilation as a child, still strove to earn quality education that has catapulted her to her current position as a university lecturer, who is also striving to address the injustices that women face daily across Africa.
That's the dream.
How do you react to that?
It's quite humbling, really, because there are days that I also sit down and then I ask myself, how did I even manage to do it? Because I know several girls who have also been married off, even younger than I was, and they didn't end up, continuing with their schooling. And here I am with a master's degree in law, in human rights and democratization in Africa from one of the best universities, which is, of course, the University of Pretoria is ranked #1 for law in Africa.
Exactly.
And me being, I still think, how was this possible? But there was a lot of behind the scenes hard work that happened that people do not often see. I was committed to not be just a statistic, to say that in the Gambia you have these number of women or girls who are married off at an early age or before they're 18 years. I wanted to be much more than that, and I think that was why I strived to get to this level that I am in terms of education, and it has not been an easy journey. It will not be an easy journey, but I was determined to get what I wanted, really.
And Musu is many things. Musu, that is Musu the activist, that is Musu the teacher, that is Musu the former TRRC Deputy Executive Secretary. Yeah. Your experience, I know you resigned from the investigation, but your experience at the TRRC as Deputy Executive Secretary, this is one of the most important institutions or projects that can ever exist in this country. In terms of your experience, what did you come to learn while you were serving as Deputy Executive, one of the top really officials at the TRRC?
I think when people see or watch the TRRC, they only see the commission.
Of course, exactly.
They don't see or understand the hard work that goes behind it. There are a lot of hard-working, committed individuals behind the scenes who make the hearings worthwhile. They make it happen, but also make it flawless. They make it seem flawless. There's a lot of hard-working young men and women behind the scenes, and I think for me that has taught me that as one of the leaders at TRRC, when you have a team that is committed, when you have a team that has interest in what they're doing, when you have a team that is dedicated to the cause, there is nothing you cannot take care of. So because of that, I've learned that you need to be respectful to your subordinates in particular. You need to encourage them, and you need to really give them a boost and the recognition that they deserve. That's something that I have taken away, because having over 100 staff and with different personalities, but being able to deal with everyone, and also the importance of treating everyone with dignity and also acting in humility is something that takes the work real, because it serves as a motivation. And I'm also happy that the leadership, of course, at the TRRC is able to achieve that overall.
And you resigned. Well, you left, and I remember people calling me and saying, hey, TRRC is in crisis, find out, go and investigate. Their Deputy Executive Secretary has resigned. I said, okay, well, I'll find out.
Yeah.
But you resigned. And
yes,
then,
I did.
And then wasn't any problem at all.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, and I've told you this over the phone,
exactly,
that resignations are supposed to be a part of someone's journey. I don't think we should encourage being stifled or being stuck in one place for a very long time. I think when you identify that your purpose and what you're supposed to do within an organization has come to an end, you should be able to identify that. We have different passions and different goals. When I was offered that position, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people, and I was recommended and interviewed for that purpose. And the former Minister for Justice found me worthy of being in such a position. And I took it up and did what I could with it. And I gave it my 100%. The victims are very important and significant figures in the TRRC process, and I was able to contribute towards that for 2.5 years. So I resigned, not because there needed to be problems, but because resignations are supposed to be a part of people's journeys. And sometimes it can be heartbreaking that people always have to attach a scandal to it. And most importantly, there would be several personal reasons that will lead to someone's resignations, and it's not often that we really need to dig it and make an issue out of it. I love teaching, but also because I have other things that I want to be able to do. And just like how I took a leave of absence from the university because I wanted to commit to the TRRC, I wanted to ensure that there was no distraction. It will not be fair to both institutions if I were to do both. I'm not that kind of person. I work really hard. to the point that I don't have a life per se, but I also think that in the interest of fairness, that it's best if you do work and you know you have given it your 100%, but also learn when to move on. So it's a journey. I'm 30. I have a long way to go. So I don't think I should be restricted into just sitting in one place. And yeah, for me, that's it.
Are you contemplating going back to the university to teach?
Yes, I am considering. I love teaching. I started teaching in 2015, and I was there until my appointment in 2018. That was when I took a leave of absence from the university to be able to explore the TRC and what it had to offer. And I'm proud to be a part of that process, really.
Nice. Thank you, Musu. That will be it for this interview. And I understand that the Daily Trust officials will be here sometime in February.
March.
Yes, in March, to really present your award. It comes with a $10,000 package. Well, but I will take this to be my best interview. Thank you for coming. I think this is the best interview that I've conducted.
Thank you, Ramin. I'm humbled.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
So that is Musu Bakoto Sawo. She's just been named by Daily Trust, a top leading Nigerian newspaper, as the African of the Year. She was my guest today. Thank you for being there. We'll be back next week. Until then, goodbye.